Hey, good morning, world. It's April 27th, 2022 at 7:58 a.m. And I want to first thank literally all of you that are people who have followed us and shared us and have provided, your comments of encouragement to keep going on. And that means the world to me because honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm screaming into my pillow, right? It's incredible to see these numbers on TikTok, for example, that I think we're like close to 4 million, 1.4 million on hashtag Patrick Lovell. And I think cumulatively between hashtag the con and others, we're over 5 million views. But more importantly, we're like 13,000 followers and tens of thousands of likes and shares and all that kind of thing, which is extremely important. People, if you're starting to gravitate to this and you're starting to really pick up what I'm trying to educate you about, then please, you have to go to YouTube. You have to like and subscribe. Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con. The reason is I need these corollaries to start spiking in different arenas because I'm talking to a whole lot of people and I'm trying to galvanize a movement, and all of which will become clear to you in a moment after I lay this out. But that goes for Twitter too. Like, since Elon Musk bought Twitter, and his whole reason for doing so was to really champion free speech. Boy, I've been dropping some truth bombs on Twitter like crazy, and I'm Patrick Level 1 on Twitter, so please check me out there. And of course, I'm just Patrick Level on Facebook if you ever want to join me there. I think Facebook's kind of a dead dog, to be honest with you, but judging on what's happening here in TikTok and some other places that are occurring, a lot of people are desperate for the freaking truth, okay? And thank God you are, because there's such a wall of noise. There's such a wall of worry. What blows my mind in 2022 is that it's not like we didn't get information like 2 decades ago, right? I mean, it was pretty much in our face then, but now it's like insanely overwhelming, and information spreads at the speed of light, and so does disinformation. And everybody's got a platform, and everybody's got audience share, and everybody's struggling to try to find a voice out there. And of course, I'm not a celebrity. I'm a guy who's just a producer who put together only the most important documentary revelations in our lifetimes. And I don't say that through arrogance. It's because I know what I'm talking about. And you've got to watch The Con. The reason you've got to watch The Con is because if you're equipped with the knowledge of the details, then you look at all of this wall of noise and you go, that guy's lying to me. She's full of shit. Oh, they're trying to take me in this direction. And so the question is, why do you want to listen to Patrick Lovell? What about me in 3-minute increments with me shouting or raving or doing this and saying things that might connect and everything else? Who am I? What I am is what made The Con. And the reason I made The Con is because the world didn't make sense in the aftermath of 2008, which buried tens of millions of people, but it wasn't adding up. There was this transition between the Bush administration, which we were just coming out of, basically 12 years or 8 years of war, right, after 9/11, which was just insane. And then all of a sudden we had this sort of, blow up stock market in this housing rally that lasted from about 2004 to 2007 in a very big way. But none of us realized it was all a fucking con. And it set up tens of millions of people. It set up African Americans and minorities on one side of the equation. Then it targeted the white working class, and both of those, quite frankly, didn't have a whole lot of financial sophistication. And then it got everybody else, but then it didn't just get people in the housing market. It got the people that have been working for decades and decades and decades and saving and living responsible lives, and teachers and firefighters and people in the military and all sorts of different types of pensions, iron workers, and they saved their money. They got set up because they loaded these horrible products that were liar's loans and designed to fail. And who's they? Wall Street, the hedge funds, and the too big to fail banks, Goldman Sachs, Chase, Citigroup. All of the biggest players in the financial institutions knew exactly what they were doing, and there was a whole methodology to it. And it was almost like building, what I continue to try to tell you, that most of us are working class people. Most people have to go to a job. Most people are probably in this environment right now working 2 jobs apiece. They talked about, companies needing personnel and that, wages are going up and everything else. Well, so too is inflation, cost of goods and gas, and just everyday life. I know people that are working 2 jobs apiece, and what's amazing to me are that people who go to jobs every day, whether you're like, let's say you work at an airport, or let's say you work in construction, let's say you're a police officer or a firefighter, or you're in the military. Sorry, I've got a bug in my throat. And you work in a school or really anything. Every job has a system. Every job, personnel are required to know what their job is. People are supposed to do their job. They're supposed to show up on time. They're supposed to do their best job. They're supposed to be within the parameters of whatever that employment requires. And they get paid for that. And nobody is going to create a situation where things are going to become a train wreck all the time, because if they did, somebody would die or they would get fired. And we all know that. And it's just, we all expect and we all have to consume so much time and effort to make money to keep up with trying to survive in this crazy world that we live in. Think about it. If you're in your 30s and you came out of the 2008 great financial crisis, maybe you just got out of college, and then, we got into, 5 years of basically a depressed economy for everybody below the line. And then we ultimately wind up with COVID. And then you're looking around and then suddenly things are starting to come back to life, but then they come back to life and there's like supply chain issues, and then there's problems with inflation, and then there's this World War III business, and then housing is through the roof, and all of these things are just like blowing up and happening super, super fast, and you can't keep up, but you're just trying to go to your job, do what you got to do to provide for your family, but then things are like making you feel like you're, slipping away in mud, and you're keeping your lips above, just the surface, and you're like, what the hell's going on? Well, the con's going on. That's what's going on. And to all of the people out there that go, well, you know what, 2008 was ancient history, and so why do I want to know that? And the whole story was told. First of all, no, it wasn't. Nobody in media, not the New York Times, not the Washington Post, not CNBC, not, MSNBC or Fox or CNN, none of them told the story. I don't know, it's because if they're stupid, if they're chasing the 24-hour cycle, the story got too complicated, or they were told not to, or they just decided not to because they could read the tea leaves. Could have been a combination of all of those, quite frankly. But the bottom line is the truth never got told. And what is the truth? That tens of millions of people got set up in a freaking illegal scam that was basically a Ponzi scheme, which was just built on lies and deception all through the whole scenario, so that in the end, the guys that were the middlemen, the guys that were pushing along all the pieces of this giant puzzle, were all lying, and they were incentivized to lie because they were all paid fees that ultimately got to a point that then blew up. And because of the back end of the house, there were these derivatives trades. Then the whole global world had global contagion. So you got to understand, let's imagine, put yourself in this scenario. You go to a casino in Las Vegas, right? You hear the bells, the sounds, the whistles, maybe you're a little buzzed. You just got off the plane, you're excited, you want to get involved, but it's a little bit overwhelming at the same time. And if you don't take a step back and really think about what you're doing, you're going to dive in. Maybe you get lucky, maybe you go on a run, maybe you freaking wipe out early. Who knows? There's all sorts of stories. That's why they say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But the reality is, if you walk into the sports book, for example, right, and you look around and you have to know all of the information on all of the games and horse races and boxing matches and ultimate fighting and everything else, and you have to have, if you're going to bet smartly, you got to have the knowledge to know what each and everything is happening and taking place. So maybe, for example, the analogy is if you're an investor, and you're an investor and you want to get involved with the stock market, and the stock market has so many different corollaries and things that are happening with revenue and earnings and, things that are happening in the cycle and funding and finance and, money and Fed policy and all of those types of things. It's extremely insane. And smart people tend to do that, and successful people tend to do that, whether they stole a lot of money to get into an independent position to be able to bet a lot in the stock market, or they happen to be professionals like attorneys or doctors or whatever. They have expendable income, because typically what happens in the American sort of hierarchy is that if you're a professional and you've learned and mastered the skill of earning enough income to manage your family's expenses, to be able to have excess capital after taxes and everything else, you try to find a way to invest that money because you want your money to make money. That's freaking genius, if you ask me. That's brilliant. But what happens in this whole scenario, and we're talking about decades and decades and decades to build up to this, and by the way, before I go into the next phase of this, you have a lot of people that are young that get into things like crypto, and they're like, okay, they're going to chase the next big thing. I still have yet to really fully understand the value of crypto. I know that drug dealers and launderers can use crypto to not be traced and all of those kinds of things. But in terms of a global scale, it's not a full-on accepted currency anywhere except in specific places. I know Elon takes it to buy Teslas and that sort of thing. But you know what? We're going to have a major test here soon if the entirety of the global financial system completely collapses. And I will wager all of you that are in crypto is not going to save the day. And if it does, it's because Vladimir Putin and a whole bunch of oligarchs in China were up to something years ago that none of us see coming, and that's a possibility too. But the long and the short of it is, ironically, the US dollar is super, super strong right now. And I was thinking that because of everything that's going on and because of the insane Fed policy that I talk about all the time, that we'd see a decrease in the dollar. But the bottom line is the dollar is stronger than ever right now. And as a result, it's ironic because corporations literally want the dollar to be less strong, because on global markets, if the dollar is too strong, then their goods and their profit margins are less. And that means if you're an investor, you have less. So a couple of things that took place in the market recently, and it's usually an indicator before it hits the mainstream, but two things I want to start off with. Like, if you came out of COVID and everything ground to a halt and nobody was making any money and everything, that literally just seemed like it was about to collapse, suddenly we saw housing prices go through the roof. Suddenly we saw the stock market go through the roof. Why is that? Well, it's because of everything I show you in the con, okay? There's Fed policy that's insane. So you go to work, you make an income, you have to work hard, and you have to earn everything that you get so that when you start to buy things for yourself and your family, you really start to think about things. Can I afford that ice cream for that kid, or those special shoes, or a vacation that I want to take? All of those things require money, and you earned it. The money didn't grow on trees for you, right? And then suddenly, your investments, for example, if you do get to that point where you're involved with investments and they go up and down and up and down and up and down, and suddenly they plunge and all of a sudden you lost all your investment, does somebody come and freaking rescue you? No, you lost. And then you got to start again from scratch. That's what happens to regular people. But is that what happens in the stock market for the too big to fail institutions, the asset managers and the hedge funds and the private equity guys? No, they get free fucking money. And they created this black box casino, which is in the freaking con. They create securities and bonds based on toxic assets that they bought back with free money. And guess who they sell it to? Do you think they sell it to the mom and pop? They sell it back to the government, which puts it on the global market, which then they can sit on it for a long time, and then they can sell these securities to other countries. I mean, it's so freaking insane. It's not supply demand. It's not a free economy. It's basically a set up shit show. So, a scenario that took place a couple of days ago or yesterday, which is interesting to me, right? So everybody's talking about, Elon Musk purchasing Twitter. And look, he put together this financing for a deal. I don't know the ins and outs of everything he did, but I guess he bought Twitter for like $46 billion, which to me personally, if it's all about free speech, I'm really stoked on that, because I'm truth bombing the con like crazy on Twitter right now, and we'll see if I start to pick up some steam there and to make things happen. But he spent, let's say, $46 billion, okay? He's the world's richest man, supposedly, right? On paper, whatever that means. Tesla's stock yesterday literally tanked $100 billion, okay? But is Elon Musk fretting? No, because he cashed out of his stock it's 6 months ago. So the guy's got so much liquid cash, it's unbelievable. And then Fed policy eventually will come to the rescue. And basically if I look at what Elon Musk achieved, which is really quite extraordinary. And by the way, I'm all about electric vehicles, and I'm very aware of all of the different things that impede, really the net of what happens in the climate change, calculus. But I'm all over the technology. I'm all over what he's been able to achieve. And I'm pretty impressed with SpaceX and everything else, even though I know he's a billionaire and he's got some issues and all of those other things. But as far as billionaires go, if he does buy Twitter and he does make it all about free speech, we'll see. I'll be like the first to tell you, quite frankly. But he lost 100 billion plus 46 billion. And a guy like him, you would think, oh my God, how's that going to affect the outcome? financed the freaking deal for one. His name is what really people follow, and because he got over the threshold. Dude, SpaceX and Tesla were literally in bankruptcy pretty much 2 years ago. Wall Street was, or 5 years ago, I guess. Wall Street was shorting him like crazy, but he got over it. He overcame it. Now he's the world's richest man, more than Jeffrey Bezos, which is insane. I didn't think anybody could come close to Bezos, but Tesla, he has. But anyway, that gives you the fluctuations of the stock market and how that works. But how does that play out in the real economy? What happens in the real economy, stagnant wages for the most part, inflation, and then everything's out of reach. Real estate, all based on Fed policy. So what I'm trying to express to you is we got to create this insane movement that we call the Justice Party. I'm unveiling it now. I'm going to dovetail this into a party that exists. I'm still working out the details, but it's the Justice Party. And what my goal is I'm going to educate literally, hopefully, tens of millions of you, but hopefully thousands that will eventually run for office, but hundreds of thousands of activists that get in the streets, that work with us to basically out corruption for what it is. Because the corruption is what matters. And I'll give you an example. Like if you watch all of the cable companies like MSNBC, Fox, CNN, whatever your brand of that spin is on a 24-hour cycle, this is what I've noticed over the course of the last 10 years, really. They're all politically driven. They don't talk about business. They don't talk about what's happening in the stock market. Now, they have subsidiaries like Fox News or CNBC and all of these others, that's what they do all day. And, it's pretty much out there, but they don't integrate how this whole thing works. But the power structure of the world, of course, comes from money. You're not that stupid to know that's not how it works. We know that money drives the show, right? My grandfather used to say is you drive for show and you putt for dough. It's all about the Benjamins, man. We all know that. And the Benjamins, do they grow out of thin air? Well, if you're a billionaire and you're a hedge fund and a titan on Wall Street, yeah. And that's what we got to stop. Because, see, the United States government, the way it works with policy, again, the dollar, it became the world's global currency because we won World War II. We were the only country that was left standing that could rebuild the world. That's what we did. And then we sold it out because, all these middlemen in the United States, particularly from our finance industry, were looking for cheaper places to park their capital to produce the goods that we all consume. And most of the American consumer wanted cheap goods. Okay, that's great, but then it's a race to the bottom. But then what we ultimately did was we replaced consumerism because we all had incomes back in the day, and we had stronger unions, and people had, healthcare and all of those types of things before we privatized everything. Ultimately, all of those types of things gave people the opportunity to buy homes so that it would increase in value over the course of time because people stayed there to raise their families, to get them through college, and then eventually their houses were worth more, okay? That's kind of that's the common sense supply-demand sort of scenario based on the fundamentals. But now things go crazy because we give free fucking money to the goddamn criminals that stole everything. So I need to educate every single one of you about who got away with what. And I'm going to finish with this morning, okay? Barack Obama is all over the stump right now. He's campaigning. This is like getting ready for the midterms and all that shit. It's the Democratic Party is the Barack Obama party right now, which is based on the Clinton party, which is based on the Wall Street meritocracy revolving door, of which I'd say Barack Obama is the kingpin of the deep state, if you want to know the truth. Why? Because Obama's out there saying we need more, censorship. We don't need more censorship. It's easy to say that, well, you would make sense if you're Obama and you want censorship because you don't want Patrick Lovell revealing that Obama covered up for the world's largest grift and cover up in history that never ended. And that's what pays him. Yeah, does he get book sales and all of these other things and this credibility? Yeah, is he a charismatic guy and a very, likable guy? You better believe it. But he's a freaking mammoth facade. The guy covered for what destroyed millions, and he's never held to account for that. I don't want to listen to Barack Obama talk about censorship, but I'm going to tell you this. Goddamn Trump is a freaking disaster. He's a train wreck. All of the stuff that's being revealed is that the goddamn, insurrection based on the big lie was all fraud. It just baked into the system because Trump literally learned during the liar's loans era, which again is on display in the con, how to do documentation fraud, how to lie, steal, and cheat your way to profits, that nobody's going to stop you. And so he figured, okay, nobody's going to stop me. We've all seen Batman. What happens when Penguin and Joker get away with everything? Do they slow down? No! Look, the Justice Party has got to be about the facts and reining in corruption and reining in the bad guys that continue to steal with impunity, because it's insane. It's beyond anything I've ever seen in my lifetimes, so that people who work for a living on the bottom rungs can never get ahead because they're cattle, because they're freaking just the numbers on a spreadsheet. Look, my name is Patrick Lovell, okay? My last name means the wolf. Jon Snow, for a cultural reference, right? Pop culture. Do you ever see Game of Thrones, Jon Snow, the whole situation? You remember in the end when he's talking to Cersei, with all of the different survivors that are basically trying to figure out whether or not they're going to ally to fight the army of the dead versus each other, and Cersei, and they're all trying to do this, sort of three-dimensional chess stuff, and ultimately Cersei asks a straightforward question about who Jon Snow is going to have allegiance to, and he just tells him the truth, and at the end he says, everybody's asking, well, you could have just lied to get what you wanted. And he's like, no, I'm not going to lie. Because, in a world full of lies, all you get are better and better lies. That's what we're in the midst of. My last name is Lovell, which means wolf. And by the way, I've got a dog who looks just like Ghost. His name is Jupiter. And by the way, again, James Lovell, Captain James Lovell of Apollo 13, and 13 means revolution. Look, I'm trying to create a revolution in your mind, an economic paradigm shift, a justice shift, all based on the rule of law, to where good people and dynamism can thrive so that people can move up in a system and we can recreate this nightmare that we're all in the midst of, which is nothing but a gigantic crime syndicate that's global. And I swear to God, like the great George Carlin said, they don't give a shit about you. And please be careful when I say the word revolution. We've got to come together in a civil, constructive way with the facts that goes out into the streets, surrounds the Congress, gets tens of millions of people out there with the facts to start chanting the con, and then we start to translate that into a political movement with teeth to overcome this madness. Because everybody who's been there for decades, right? And I'm not even talking about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. They're good people. They themselves are not corrupt, but they play on the playing field of the corrupt by the corrupt's terms. Okay? They're not bringing the facts to you. If we had the facts in the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, and we had critical mass, we could shut this shit down overnight. It's the Battle of Gotham. What side are you on? Onwards and upwards.